Welcome to another episode of Good Stuff. I'm Dave.
And I'm Scott.
And we get together about, I don't know, feels like about once a month. We try, right? Ish. And just talk about things. I had suggested, Scott, that we talk about what we were watching during quarantine, but you tell me you're just too dang busy. Is that work or is that work around the house?
So we had a new grandbaby. We had, you and I've lived through an earthquake or two over the last
holy cow.
I've been building things rather than watching TV. So I really haven't been streaming much. So.
Yeah. Well, you're being way more productive than I, that's for sure. So for those that aren't aware, Scott and I both live in the great state of Utah, the pretty great state of Utah. And what was the magnitude of that earthquake? Do you remember?
So the original one a few weeks ago was 5.7, which is a decent earthquake. The one last night was only 4.2.
I didn't even feel last night's.
Last night shook is pretty good, but we're a little closer to the epicenter than you are.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, let's hope that. I'm just hoping we're done with earthquakes. The one from a few weeks ago, literally the lights in the kitchens were swinging back and forth. It was crazy.
Yeah, it woke you up. It was like 7 a.m.
Yeah.
Got us going.
Sure did. Okay, so our topic then today, and I'm going to, before we get going too much, we don't have a soda to test out, but I'll just keep nursing that Diet Coke. Our topic today, I threw a survey out to the channel community probably a couple weeks ago, and the question was, who was your favorite Three's Company beauty? And I did it that way because I didn't want to even put John Ritter in I didn't want to say roommate, because John Ritter is in a class of his own. He, in my mind, is one of the great all-time physical comedians, particularly if you look at that era, the 70s, early 80s on television. And so just a great actor, physical comedian, like I said, and there's a lot of things that we could say about him. I didn't want to rank him out with the ladies. I just felt like that was a little bit unfair. But I have a lot of great memories of John. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially from this show. I mean, I'm a huge MASH fan, and I remember he did a guest appearance, he appeared on MASH. He was in the Waltons. There were a few things that he was in before Three's Company. But once he was in Three's Company and you started seeing some of the reruns of like MASH and other things, you're like, it's John Ritter, but no, just great memories of him, and from everything you read about him, just an all-around likable guy.
Yeah, son of Tex.
Yeah, Tex Ritter. How about that?
Right. Father to Jason. I think Jason's in the business and has done some acting. And I enjoyed him also there were a few movies that I really thought he was great in. There was one back in the late 70s called Hero at Large. I don't know if you ever saw this one. He's an actor, a struggling actor who gets paid to dress up as a superhero and go to supermarkets and make appearances. And he ends up performing some heroic deeds. And then the whole story is about people get involved and start manipulating, creating fake heroic deeds for him to do. And it's just a whole comedy drama around really being true to yourself and being honest with those around you. And there's a little romance in there as well. It very, very fun movie. If you ever get a chance to see it, Ann Archer, I don't know if you know who Ann Archer is. Yeah. Lovely lady, is also in that movie, as well as the love interest. And Ritter's just really good. Ritter's just being John Ritter, that kind of easygoing every guy that John Ritter plays so well. Nice. And then I even enjoyed him after Three's Company. There was Hooperman. I don't know if you ever saw that. It was a dramedy from Stephen Bochco of Hill Street Blues fame.
Right.
And then there was Hearts of Fire with Marquis Post that he did later on. And then there was 10 Things About My Daughter or something like that. That was the show where he passed away.
He was filming that when he died, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But great actor. We don't want to rank him out. We'll just say he's one of a kind and phenomenal. Yeah. But we do have 4 roommates that we wanted to, well, I threw it out to the community, and we're going to kind of count down those roommates. So coming in at number 4 with a 10% vote, Scott, who do we have?
Oh, number 4. You know what? I should have been paying attention, but with 10% of the vote was Jenna Lee Harrison.
Yes, as Cindy Snow.
Yeah, Cindy Snow, which was Chrissy's sister, right?
Cousin,
yeah.
Yeah. They had, their fathers were brothers. And if I remember the backstory correctly, this was all because of the whole Suzanne Somers contract negotiations that ultimately resulted in her leaving the show. They brought in Jenny Lee Harrison. I think it was the 5th season. Suzanne was still with the show, but she was filming just kind of like little endings on the show. Mm-hmm. And Jenny Lee was her cousin who, since Chrissy was taking care of her mother, Jenny Lee was taking advantage of that opportunity to come and stay with the roommates. And
right.
It kind of always felt like a temporary thing. And she was with the show for the 5th and 6th seasons, although in the 6th season, she wasn't quite as, we had our number 3 roommate had joined the cast during the 6th season. And so Jenny Lee's performances or appearances as Cindy, they weren't as frequent, although they were, still she was on the show quite a bit during season number 6.
Yeah, and interestingly, I think her character, rather than Suzanne Somers being the ditzy blonde, right? Her character was more physically inept versus mentally inept, right? But that was Jack Ritter's bailiwick. Why would you take that away from him? He was such a physical comedian that it just didn't, for me, it didn't work.
Right. She was klutzy as opposed to being, ditzy, right? And she was not as ditzy. As a matter of fact, I think during that 2nd season that she was on, season 6, she was going to UCLA to be a veterinarian. So they were trying to kind of show that there were some brains behind this girl who was somewhat clumsy. I actually liked Jenny Lee a lot on the show. I will tell you right now, I thought she was fine, and I think she could have carried on, but I know that ratings were struggling a little bit during the 5th and 6th seasons, and they wanted to try to juice it up a little bit, and that's why we had the addition of a brand new permanent roommate at the beginning of season 6, who is the YouTube community voted her as their 3rd favorite Three's Company roommate, and that is, Scott?
Oh, Priscilla Barnes. No relation.
Priscilla Barnes. Yeah, that's right. Are you sure there's no relation?
No relation.
Okay.
Although, there's a great tie-in here because I'm a huge James Bond fan, and she was not really a Bond girl, but she was. She was Della. She was Felix Leiter's wife in the Timothy Dalton led casts for.
That's right.
But she died.
Does. Yeah, I was going to say she doesn't make it, if I remember correctly.
Felix makes it after having been half eaten by a shark, but Della doesn't.
Sadly. Yeah, Priscilla Barnes has actually made quite a career post Three's Company in various kind of supporting roles, and she hasn't been on television in any sort of recurring every week after week TV series, at least that I can think of, but I see her in movies all the time, just little kind of bit performances. She's really turned into kind of almost like a character actor, but I liked her as Terry Alden. She was a nurse on the show, if you remember correctly. And there was you talk about how that Jenny Lee's character, Cindy, was less ditzy, and they instead kind of made her klutzy. I think they'd received quite a bit of pressure to, why are you creating these women that are stereotypical, empty-headed? There's no reason why they can't be funny and smart and intelligent too. And that's the type of character they were trying to create with Terry Alden.
Yeah. And in the ranking that's on YouTube, I probably would have voted the exact same way, but I may have put Suzanne Somers as number 3 and Terry and Priscilla as number 2. But
yeah. See, for me, I might have gone Cindy as number 3 and Terry as number 4. I never really clicked with. I mean, I liked the character. Don't get me wrong, she was fine. But I really liked the character of Cindy Snow. I thought she was a good replacement for Chrissy, and it was sad to see that character phased out during season 6. So that does take us to the second favorite roommate. And this is this is where I was kind of curious where the community would land. Who would it be? Would it be Suzanne Somers, who is immensely popular on Three's Company? Or would it be Joyce DeWitt as Janet Wood? And Scott, do you want to do the honors? Who came in at second place?
Yeah, second place, Suzanne Somers as Chrissy Snow.
Yeah, 29% of the voting community ranked her as their favorite, and which gives, let's not have any more suspense, Joyce DeWitt as Janet Wood was 49%, almost half of the 2,000 people, approximately 2,000 people that voted in this survey, voted her as their favorite. So let's talk about Suzanne for a little bit. It sounds to me like she wasn't your favorite of all the characters.
She started the show, and the chemistry and everything between the three, I think, was awesome. She just played that stereotypical dumb blonde.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of turned me off, where, we came out of an era of watching like I Dream of Jeannie, where Jeannie pretended to be a ditzy blonde, but really wasn't.
Right.
Where Chrissy's character kind of was. And also Gilligan's Island, right? So you've got the whole Ginger versus Marianne comparison here. And I put although, completely different characters, I kind of put Suzanne Somers with the Ginger kind of side of things where, not quite accessible, not quite as girl next door-ish as Ginger, or I'm sorry, as Marianne and Joyce DeWitt.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. I think the comparisons are fair. And I think that's why a lot of folks really kind of have more of an affinity for Joyce DeWitt's Janet Wood character. She's just seems more approachable, more level-headed. At the end of the day, if you had to pick someone to be your friend to date or whatever, to use the Ginger Marianne comparison,
right?
I think a lot of folks would pick Janet Wood instead of Chrissy Snow. And then there's the whole issue with just the contract negotiations, the fact that the character didn't last throughout the run of the TV series. I know it ran 8 seasons on ABC, and she was only on it, really, honestly, she was only on it for 4 seasons. That, like I said, that 5th season, there were appearances at the end of each episode via a phone call that she would make to her roommates. But she really wasn't part of the show at that point. They weren't acting together. They would bring Suzanne Somers in on the cast day off to film those scenes. There was just so much acrimony between the cast members at that point. And I'm really glad that they all made up Suzanne made up with John prior to his passing, and Joyce and Suzanne have now made up as well. It's good to know that, you finally let all that go. But I think there's a lot of reasons why Suzanne Somers' character didn't end up being the most popular Three's Company roommate when we're ranking out the favorite of the female roommates on the show. So that takes us to number 1. You've already kind of hit the nail on the head with Joyce DeWitt's Janet Wood, but any other things that you remember about that character that appealed to you?
Suzanne's character had the long hair and all that stuff, and Joyce DeWitt always had very short hair. It was always kind of avant-garde for the time, and I think that had, a lot to do with it. Just that, she was her own person, and she kind of stood out. And in some of the comments on your last post, on Three's Company 2, there were folks that were, talking about the love interest between her and John, and it never really resolving. And you kind of hoped that would have been the case.
Yeah.
Because you could see the two of them kind of coming together, whether that was real or not. I really doubt it was, but there was a great friendship there, you could tell.
Right. There absolutely was. And you're right. There was chemistry between the two actors, right? There really was. And the producers went a different way. They married Joyce off, or Janet off, at the final episode of Three's Company. And then John Ritter had his sequel with Vicky, Three's a Crowd, and which was not beloved the same way that Three's Company was. It's also known as Three's Company 2. I think when it plays in reruns in some areas, they call it Three's Company 2, but it just wasn't the same, didn't have the same vibe, didn't have the same good feelings. Quite frankly, the cast members didn't have the same chemistry. Right. John Ritter and, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the gal that played Vicky, but they just didn't have that same level of chemistry that John and Joyce had when they were filming Three's Company. It's too bad that the producers didn't pick up on that. I think they could have had a sequel that would have lasted a lot longer if they'd maybe keyed in on that relationship and taken it in that direction instead.
Yeah, I agree with you. That would have been a great spinoff, the two of them going off and drag in a roommate just for fun.
Right. They could have found some way to make sure that shenanigans were ensuing. That's for sure. All right. Well, I have to admit, like I said, I was a little surprised that it was such a convincing win for Joyce DeWitt as Janet Wood, but no real surprise. I kind of suspected that she might end up being the number one favorite roommate. So thanks for walking through the list with me, Scott.
Hey,
I appreciate you. What else is going on with you right now? Anything exciting?
No, not really. Just cooped up at home. Luckily, I had, I'd been working from home for a while, and we worked for a great employer who's super prepared for this. So, now I'm just turning this home office into a little studio when I meet with you. So,
yeah, it's working out pretty well, actually. Yeah. It's a lot of fun to do these. We'll have to figure out what our topic is for next month, but really, really appreciate you spending a little time with me this evening talking through Three's Company, which truly was, as I was growing up, it was one of those shows. I've talked about this on a couple of videos. Initially, when it came out, I don't know how your folks were, but my folks were like, oh, no, you're not watching that. And it took us a while as kids for us to wear down the parents. And then, ultimately, as it's played on reruns now, if you watch the show, it's like, what was the big deal? This is one of just the most good-natured, I'm not going to say completely wholesome, because you could point to some things that, a little salacious, a little titillating, but it was never really anything that was overly offensive. There was a sweet nature to most of the storylines, and at the end of the day, what you're dealing with are, when you're talking about the roommates and their landlord, whether it be Norman Fell and Audra Lindley or the great Don Knotts. These were good people that were just trying to support each other the best that they could, and in a half-hour situation comedy, right?
Yeah. No, it was. I honestly don't remember if there was a lot of pushback. My family not quite as strict as yours was when it came to viewing habits. But yeah, it was definitely, you knew it was Three's Company time. The whole family was there watching it. So
that's awesome. All right. Well, thanks again. Hey, what I would say to the YouTube community out there, if you're watching this video and if you enjoy, to give this video a thumbs up and, subscribe to the channel. I talk about music. We at times talk about music, movies, and television, mostly from 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s.
The good stuff.
That's right. But most importantly, and as always, I will say this, and I know Scott will as well, thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.